So, what can I say? The name is on the panel of the channel. Some of you may know that name. Some of you may have heard my talks on the internet, which run into the hundreds, talks and interviews. Some of you may have read my books. What I have to say now can be taken without knowing anything about me at all. Of course, you are free, to use a common expression, to go and investigate who I am and what I'm known for. But I can assure you that who I am is not the principal question to ask. Have you ever asked yourself that question? Who am I? There was an Indian philosopher named Ramana Maharshi who based all of his teaching on that question. He considered that to be the ultimate question that anyone could ask. And he announced to the world that he knew the answer to that question, and it was the same answer for everyone. So Ramana Maharshi is famous to this day for his teachings that are an expression, which are an expression of the ancient Vedic wisdom of India. And according to that body of wisdom, the answer to the question, who am I, is God. So the point, the outcome, the takeaway of that teaching is the same for everyone. The ultimate identity of every conscious human being is the consciousness of God, according to that school, according to that tradition. Now, I take issue with that venerable formula of ancient wisdom, but I'm not going to go into that here. The point of this talk is to address what I consider to be a far more intriguing question, a far deeper question, a far more productive question. And what is that question? What am I? And what are you? What are you? Now that question is a key that can open a view of life like nothing else. And so I'm going to pursue that question right here and right now. There are two approaches to that question, two ways to answer it. And that distinction goes back to a formula of anthropology and mythology, the formula of the sacred and the profane. So the sacred and the profane is a meme, and it's a very big deal. Many things have been written and said about it. The answer to the question, the short answer to what am I, is the profane answer. That is to say, the mundane and conventional answer. And in my case, the answer is, I'm a writer, I'm a teacher, and my career defines me as a comparative mythologist. That's what I am. I'm a comparative mythologist. Short answer. Next comes the long answer. And that is the answer in the context or perspective of the sacred. So what am I and what are you in the perspective of the sacred? And you can put a capital S on the sacred. So what do I mean by the sacred? It's essential to have a definition to agree on in order for this talk to make any sense. So I invite you provisionally to accept this definition of the sacred with a capital S. The word sacred goes back to the Sanskrit root shak, which is spelled S-A-K, and it's found in the word Shakti. And the definition of the sacred that I propose to you is not based on cultural values or opinions or interpretations. It's based on a dynamic view of the universe. The universe is an event, an action. Your life is an event within the great event of the universe. And the sacred, with a capital S, is the power that drives that event. It is the original power from which everything arises. It is the original and perpetual power present in every moment that drives the event of the universe and drives the event of your life. Sacred means power. The root sak, or shak, can be found in the word sacred and in the word sacrifice, sacrament, sacrilege. Sacrifice means to make the sacred. It means to act with the sacred in response to the sacred. And so, in order to know what you are, you need to know what the sacred is and how you have, or how you can have, a direct, conscious, and actional relation to the sacred. So I'm guessing that that definition is pretty clear. It's only provisional, as Socrates says. We construct definitions of things and we use terms simply so that we can have a conversation. We agree on those terms provisionally in order to proceed with the conversation, or in this case, with the exposition of a particular topic. So I would advise you to stay on board with me with that definition of the sacred. That is the original and foundational power that drives the event of the world. There are, of course, immediate connotations of the sacred. I presented a denotation, and there are connotations that immediately arise, such as the supernatural, the transcendent, the absolute, and so forth. There's no need to be concerned with those right now. That definition is sufficient to hold the course in what I'm going to say and what you're going to hear. In the course of my work in creative mythology, which, by the way, spans a lifetime, I would say it goes back to the 3rd or 4th grade, when I was about 10 years old, and I discovered a children's picture book about the discovery of the grave treasures of Tutankhamun. So the first subject in mythology that came to my attention as a child was Egyptian mythology. The work of a comparative mythologist is to survey and compare all the myths from all the cultures of the world in all times, but especially, of course, in ancient times, since most of the received material, most of the surviving evidence of mythology comes out of ancient cultures. The creative mythologist makes an inventory of all these myths and takes note of the themes that you find in these myths. And there are a number of themes, a limited number of themes, which may also be called mythemes, that recur in different myths from around the world. And these themes appear in different ways, but they also appear in similar ways. So you have the concept of parallel myths. For instance, the theme of the flood can be found in many mythologies. Likewise, for the theme of twins, upon which I've written a book, or the theme of the hero, the theme of the goddess, and several others. There's a finite number. In addition to the content of world mythology, the comparative mythologist takes great interest in the different genre, different types of myths. My purpose here is to direct your attention to one particular type of myth. This is called Oneiric myth. O-N-E-I-R-I-C. It comes from the Greek word oneros, which means dream. So there is a genre of myths that describe reality as a dream. Not all myths do this. It's a special genre. And I might say, it's a rather elite genre. The examples of Oneiric myth stand alone in a category that has properties different from all other genres. What are some examples of Oneiric myth? Well, there is the Hindu myth of Vishnu, the dreaming god. That myth states that the god Vishnu actually dreams events, dreams entire worlds, civilizations, planets, planetary systems. Another expression of Oneiric myth can be found in the saying of the San Bushman of South Africa. There is a dream dreaming us. You find the same expression among the Aborigines of Australia in their concept of the dream time, or the old stone time, the Alcharinga. In the worldview of the Australian Aborigines, the very landscape they inhabit, the rivers, streams, the mountains, great plains in the sky, all that landscape, material, physical landscape, is a dream, and they wander about in the landscape of the dream. Another example comes in the tribal lore of the Huitito Indians of Colombia. They actually have a word for the world dream, which they call Nainema. Nainema. When they say Nainema, they assert that they are living in a dream world. So there you have 4 examples of Oneiric mythology. A few others could be cited, perhaps, but I want to impress upon you the fact that this genre of myth is relatively rare, relatively small, a small sampling of the entire repertoire of world myth. There is one other example in that genre, which is the paramount expression of Oneiric mythology. I'll get to what that is in the course of this talk. Now, if you can accept the fact, and it is a fact, that Oneiric mythology exists, and if you can regard it, as it ought to be regarded, as a genuine expression of the creative imagination of humanity, it brings you to a question. It begs the question. Well, if the world is a dream, the world event, including my life and my identity, is a dream, who is the dreamer? Big question, isn't it? I can assure you, at the moment the question comes up, that you are not the answer. The premise of Oneiric mythology, in all its variants, asserts that you, the experient in the dream, are not the dreamer. So what are you? You are not the dreamer. You are the actor in the dream of the dreamer. An actor, a character, as if you were, say, a character in a novel or in a movie. So there, in an inceptive concept, an inceptive formula, is the answer to the question, what am I? And the answer to the question, what are you? The answer is the same for everyone. We are all actors, characters in a dream. And we are not the ones who are dreaming that dream. So you are not the dreamer of your own life. This is a proposition inherent in Oneiric mythology. You can call this the leading proposition. Now, if you contemplate the leading proposition for just a moment, you might see how it leads immediately back to the topic of the sacred. The sacred is the power source of everything. Therefore, it must be the sacred that is the source of the dream. The sacred is the dreamer. You could say God, by whatever name you might attach to the concept of God, is the dreamer. Whatever it is, whatever you choose to call it, there is an ultimate power, Shakti, at the source of the world dream. That assertion is simple enough, isn't it? It's clear enough. Yet that assertion is merely the portal to an investigation unlike any other. The investigation goes to another question. How can I, the actor in a dream, come to know the source of that dream? I have my life. I live my life. You live your life as if it were yours alone. But in fact, that cannot be so. Your life has a source. What is the source of your life? What is the source of all life? What is the connection? What is the relationship between your life in the living dream of the universe and the source of that dream? It's one thing to state the proposition, the leading proposition, that you're a character living in a dream. It's another thing altogether to make that connection. Oneiric myth is a special and exclusive category for various reasons, which come to the attention of the comparative mythologist. But this proposition, as I now present it to you, carries an opportunity. What is that? It's the opportunity for gnosis. Gnosis. The word means knowledge in Greek, but it's not just any kind of knowledge. Gnosis is knowledge of the source, the origin, the original, foundational power of all that is. Gnosis is also knowledge of the dynamic connection between that power and what comes of that power, what it supports, what it manifests. You are the manifestation of the source power, but do you have a direct access and relation to it? Gnosis is the path of direct access. And along that path, which is a learning curve, you come to know and experience many, many things. Because the dynamic that connects you to the source, that connects the actor to the dreamer, has many dimensions. For instance, if you were to come into intimate knowledge of the sacred, that is gnosis, then you would not only realize directly, existentially, in the moment, in physical reality, your connection to the dreamer, but you would also learn how the dreamer dreams everything. Not merely your life, but the natural world. Trees, rivers, clouds. You would come to know how the dreamer dreams races and civilizations. But all of those insights, all of those features of gnosis that you might acquire rely on one fundamental verification. That is the verification, the direct first-hand verification that you, who is being dreamed, knows the dreamer. You encounter the dreamer, and everything proceeds from there. Knowing the dreamer is the basis of Gnostic wisdom and the Gnostic view of life. All that being said, I invite you to return to the genre of Oneiric mythology. As I've said, it's a special category of myth. Now, given that you see its special character, it's natural to ask, how do the surviving versions of Oneiric mythology explain who the dreamer is and how to be intimate in that knowledge, how to activate and enable the knowledge of the dreamer. The question is, if you were to go and look into those examples of Oneiric mythology, you would do so with a specific purpose, to see what they tell you about the dreamer-actor dynamic, as it might be called. Needless to say, that's quite an investigation. And certainly, you would learn some things about the human psyche, about the natural world, about the sacred, transcendent dimension of reality. You might learn all kinds of things. Certainly, you would have insights and realizations in the course of that query that would be profound. And you might also become confused and uncertain. I can assure you that were you to undertake that investigation, you would find that none of the surviving versions of Oneiric myth provide the essential truth. As a matter of fact, there is only one example of Oneiric myth that does reveal the profound and ultimate truth about the world dream. Only one. Needless to say, that is a unique myth, and I can assure you that it is a most sophisticated one as well. It is complex and sophisticated. To learn that myth and apply it in your life takes determination. Without discipline, it is impossible to master the gnosis of the living dream, so that you become an actor who knows, first of all, what you are, and going deeper, who comes to know what is your role. What role do you play in the dream? What role do you play in the consciousness of the dreamer? Now, if you had a part in a movie, or if you were a character in a novel someone wrote, it would be clear that you have a role in the story. An actor in a film, starring actor, who doesn't know his or her role in the film, is not going to deliver much of a performance, right? So for you to perform at the optimal of your ability, the highest expressions of your talent and your passion, for you to achieve that level of performance in life requires a deep and intimate knowledge of the dreamer and how the dream event operates. This paramount example of Oneiric mythology, which stands completely alone, has to be appreciated and valued on the recognition of what it offers to you. So what does it offer that no other mythic scenario can offer? It offers you entrance and engagement with that dreaming power of the source. It offers the opportunity to bond your power with the source power. consider the fact that you are living right now, in the moment that you hear these words, due to the life force that sustains you. You draw upon that life force to live. When that life force is exhausted, you no longer live. But how did you acquire that life force that sustains you in this very moment? It's given to you by the source, and it is sustained continually at every moment by the source that gives it to you in the first place. So once again, stop and reflect on where the leading proposition takes you. If you play it out, just play it out. Doesn't involve complex metaphysical questions, doesn't involve theology, doesn't involve any profound statements about the nature of reality, does it? Leading proposition is right there in your face, in the fact of being alive. But in the profane way of life, the connection to the sacred is lost. So people live out their lives, they expend the life force given to them without ever considering how they might take that life force back to the source and bond with the power that gives life. But that is possible. It is possible to do that. And the framework for doing that is this one singular and paramount Oneiric myth. Well, having said all that, I invite you to return to my definition, in the profane sense, of what I am. I'm a comparative mythologist. And all through my lifetime of study, I have been led to one outstanding question. Where is that myth to be found? Where is that unique myth to be found? How could you find it if you were a comparative mythologist? Well, obviously, you have to make the inventory, don't you? First, you look at the total collection, the total compilation of world myths. Then you select out of it those examples of Oneiric myth, and then you look into those examples to find the most profound and instructive case. And what happens if you undertake that investigation? Well, I can share with you my conclusion. It is extremely difficult to find that case. There is a set of source books, reference books, basic to the field of comparative mythology. And everyone who enters the field must know these volumes by heart. The title of the set is The Mythology of All Races. It was published in 12 volumes in the first part of the 20th century. The Mythology of All Races presents exactly what the title states. So there are different volumes dedicated specifically to the mythology of specific races. We have Japanese, Egyptian, Chinese, Oceanic, Teutonic, Slavic, and others. Now, when you look at this entire collection with the question in mind, where is the ultimate Oneiric myth? Guess what happens? It's not in there. Now that exclusion itself is a remarkable fact. Naturally, one has to wonder, it appears there's a myth that's missing. What is the myth that's missing? And why is it missing? Now, you might sense that this investigation I'm inviting you to undertake with me, at least I'm presenting the summary of my own investigation as a comparative mythologist. This investigation runs in a particular direction. It raises a difficult problem. Once you see that the myth that's missing is the only myth that fully and profoundly explains the relation of the actor to the dreamer, well, you have to wonder, how come it's missing? And by the way, lest I have said something confusing, let me clarify. To say that the myth is missing is not to say that it is absent, that it is not there. What I mean is that it's missing from the compilation of all the myths of the world, but it can be found somewhere. Just because it's not in that master reference collection doesn't mean that it does not exist. But in the course of the investigation, you have to go elsewhere to look for it. So where is it to be found, the myth that's otherwise missing? Well, it's to be found in the surviving materials that come from the ancient movement known as Gnosticism. And that's the only place it can be found. So finally, and here's the takeaway, there is a name for that myth. It can be called the Sophianic myth. It can also be called the fallen goddess scenario. Now, if you put fallen goddess in a search engine, you will find that the myth comes up because it is the only myth that fits that title. There are other myths, and in fact, there is a myth theme that occurs all around the world, from, say, Melanesia to the Middle East, and even into South America. There is another myth theme of the descending goddess, the goddess who descends into the underworld. But upon close examination, it is clear that these examples of the descending goddess theme are not the same as the fallen goddess theme. There is only one example of the fallen goddess theme. That is what you find in the materials that survive from the teachings of the Gnostics, who are known to be the founders and directors of what are called the mysteries or mystery schools of the ancient world. The mysteries were the great institutions of initiation and spiritual learning of pagan, pre-Christian Europe and the Mediterranean basin and the Near East. So it can be said in conclusion that the Gnostics who directed those mysteries had a master narrative. This master narrative is unlike any other myth in the world. It is an Oneiric myth of a unique character and bearing, and of a unique application, many applications actually. In other words, It is an experiential and existential myth that you can live here and now. It is, in fact, the story to guide the human species. It is the ultimate tool of guidance for humanity. You can call it the secret teaching of the mysteries. The fact that that myth is missing from the compilation of world mythology is not due to the fact that it was withheld from the world or kept secret. Actually, it was taught in various ways outwardly. And at the time of the turning point in history, known as the beginning of the Christian era, the teachers of the mysteries were prepared to bring this myth out to the public at large, to present a version of it that would be accessible to all people. Whereas up until that time, the master narrative that they developed over many, many centuries was preserved and protected in their inner circles. However, as events unfolded and the Gnostics came forth to present this myth, they were met by tremendous opposition. They were persecuted and murdered. Their schools were destroyed. Their vast libraries of knowledge and research, such as the Library of Alexandria, were destroyed. There was tremendous opposition to the Gnostics, who were on the verge of bringing forth this myth into the world as it is now in the world. Finally, it is in the world due to the fact that it was recovered and restored. So something that belongs to all humanity, you could say the birthright of the human species, was lost for about 2,000 years. But it's not lost any longer. You can find the introduction to this myth and the orientation to it on sophianicmyth.org. You can also receive the current rendering of this myth in 9 episodes through that platform. Now, as I bring this talk to its conclusion, I invite you, if you take any interest in this great topic, consider two questions in one. First, who originated this myth? What people? What race? And second, how come this myth and the vast body of Gnostic intel that comes along with it was the target of destruction? Who wanted to destroy it and why? Well, those are several questions, but you get the drift. If you take any interest in the Sophianic myth, if you're willing to recognize its unique character, it might engage your passion. In fact, it must engage your passion. Otherwise, you cannot really benefit from what this myth has to offer. If you have a passionate interest in knowing the answer to those final questions, then I'll see what I can do to cover the matter in another talk. And for now, that's all I can say.